Good afternoon to colleagues, guests, and panelists. Welcome to the 5th online panel discussion as part of the Higher Colleges of Technology Future Readiness Initiative. My name is Walid Braimo, and on behalf of the Strategy and Future team here at HCT, I'll be moderating today's session. Today we shall be discussing personalized education, particularly in the context of recent global developments and its impact on the education sector. It's a useful juncture to start to ask why personalized education should now be of greater strategic importance to education institutions, what its benefits are for students and the wider institution, and what do we need to do to realize it. So the title of this panel is Personalized Anytime, Anywhere, Education and Service, which is one of HCT's new strategic aspirations. I would like to introduce a distinguished panel to bring the issues to light. So it's my honor to introduce Professor Andreas Kaplan, who is the Dean of the European School of Commerce in Paris. Good afternoon, Professor Kaplan. I would also like to introduce Dan McFadden. Dan is the Managing Director of a company called Idalex. He's joining us from Australia. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. Very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Hani Abu Ghazaleh, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Mental VR. He's based here in the UAE. Good afternoon, Hani.
Good afternoon. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Dominic Orr, who is a researcher and author in educational management. He's originally from Germany, currently teaching in Slovenia. Good afternoon, Dominic.
Yeah, good afternoon. Great to be here.
And last but not least, Dr. Jihad Mahaidat, who is the Vice President of Education Technology here at HCT, also based here in the UAE. Good afternoon, Dr. Jihad.
Good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Glad to be here as well.
Thank you. For further reference, you may access the panelists' full biographies from the panel invitation. This panel discussion will last about an hour and a half, and there will be an additional 10 to 15 minutes at the end to take questions from the audience. Please feel free to post your questions via the Q&A function on the webinar and not the chat function. We will only take questions posted via the Q&A function. There will also be 2 polls that will be taken during the panel discussion, just to get an audience perspective on the discussions and the topics that we'll be discussing at any one time. But now, to get us started, I would like to introduce Dr. Abdul Latif Al-Shamsi, the President and CEO of the Higher Colleges of Technology, for his opening address. Dr. Abdul Latif.
Thank you, Ali, and good afternoon, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-mursaleen. I'm very glad to be here today and joining the Future Readiness webinar series by HCT, and thanks for organizing this important topic, talking about personalized anytime, anywhere education and services. Special welcome to our colleagues joining us from abroad, internationally, and within the UAE, and I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all of them. Personalized learning is student-centered and compared to the teacher-centered. We all aware of how where students' learning objectives are heterogeneous in character and contents, and the method and pace of learning differ from each student and not controlled by teacher. The learner drives the learning process today by setting goals, building network, and connecting with interest and aspirations, and is responsible for the choice made in the learning process. Today, we are very fortunate with many technological tools are available to us. Big data, artificial intelligence is used to meet the individual learning needs for every learners through the constant tailoring and adaptation of the learner's learning journey. And that's what we're going to hear more from our panelists. And at HCT, in fact, students are not taught the way they were taught in high school. As young adults, students are taking more and more active role in their learning journey beyond following teacher precise instructions in a classroom. Our aim in HCT is to move away from homogeneized learning objective based on teacher preferences. Interest and aspiration, where the teacher controls all aspects of learning from contents to assessment, and the student is passive recipient, and the student is a passive recipient of knowledge. So our aim is to move more toward empowering the learner to take more control over what and how they learn, from being passive to active learners. In fact, the concept of anytime, anywhere were first introduced back in April 2018 at the Lucian Annual Conference, where we introduced the concept of Uber-like education. That was in San Diego in the US. And at that time, we have laid out the ground of future education to be delivered anywhere, anytime, based on designing a personalized learning approach for every student utilizing technology of big data and artificial intelligence. And to be honest with you, with COVID-19 have given us the advantage to accelerate the process. Today, online learning is becoming more and more integrated part of our education system. And in fact, it brings a lot of benefits to our students. The future of education will completely be revamped. It excites the Z generation through the online learning tools and make, more importantly, learning more fun and interesting. Something, in fact, the Z generation has been awaiting for a long time. I think with what we're going to hear today from our panelists, from this discussion, more of up-to-date, how can we utilize this tool to be more efficient and effective for our students and for our education system. So I would like just to conclude by thanking all of our participants today joining us from abroad and within the UAE in this webinar, and wish you all a pleasant and a future and a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdulatif, for your insightful remarks. But before we actually start the panel discussion, I would like to conduct the first of our two polls. It will just take 2 minutes, so I want you as audience members to be able to respond to this. So let me launch the poll. It's the question of the poll is, what is your understanding of the main key driver for personalized education? So let me just do that. So you should be able to see now on your screen that poll. What is your understanding of the main key driver for personalized education? Is it the traditional one-size-fits-all approach being ineffective? Is it due to underperforming learners to help them to engage better with education? Is it to do with another way to leverage advancements in technology? Or is it a way for learners to engage better with the community, or all of the above? So let's give you two minutes to respond to that, and then we'll see the results, just to get a sense of the audience perspective. So I think we have a fairly definitive answer. So I'm going to end the polling here, and let's see the results. So as you can see, we have a very clear view from the audience that all of the above are relevant to this topic. So I mean, I think that already indicates a significant amount of awareness of the topic amongst the audience, which for you as panelists you might find useful when we have our discussions shortly. So let me just close that, and we can go back to our discussion. So I want to spend the next 20 minutes, panelists, to really look at why personalized education is now of such great importance and urgency in education. So again, I'm going to ask each of you to spend up to 4 minutes giving your response. So I'm going to start with Professor Andreas. What is your view as to why personalized education is now of such great importance and urgency?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to participate in this roundtable. With regards to your question, I'm not actually so sure that it is of greater importance now than before. I think a customized or personalized approach to teaching always was important. However, new technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning make it more possible to have this personalized approach to learning and teaching. And obviously, we always want to give the best education to our students, and therefore we should definitely take all the possibilities out there now with these advances in new technology. What might introduce a certain feeling of urgency is maybe the fact that, in my opinion, we're moving heavily towards a more lifelong learning approach with the fact that early life degrees might lose a little bit of their importance. And due to society's digitalization and progress in artificial intelligence in general, job requirements will change or are changing at the speed of mobile phone updates. And that's not only me who says it, but it's also McKinsey, it's the World Economic Forum, who predict such an evolution. And obviously, a more customized and personalized approach to teaching increases the capacity for students and for alumni to autonomously learn. And this is important because they will need to reskill, upskill during their entire professional career. And it will not always be possible to come back to their alma mater for executive education or for additional training. And well, this new approach to learning definitely fosters and forges this capacity of autonomous learning. Another fact maybe is that if we look at the current challenges of today's society, even with now the pandemic of COVID-19, we see that all these challenges almost need a multidisciplinary, if not interdisciplinary approach to find solutions. And obviously, a more personalized approach to learning and teaching also enables this teaching of via a more multidisciplinary approach, because students now can participate in courses from partner universities which are maybe outside the area and discipline of their alma mater. And this multidisciplinary approach also has an additional advantage. If you know, or if you learn about different vocabularies, about different concepts, theories, even if it's very much on a basic level, it is easier for you then in an autonomous way on your own to learn about these concepts more in depth if your current job requires that. And so this also helps in this direction of continuous learning, lifelong learning. Now, to conclude this first intervention, I also think that the students should not be given the complete control over their learning, but that there has to be a framework, and that academics, teachers, professors need to kind of guide students in their journey of personalized learning, because in the end, I think they are best placed to know what is important and what a student or alumni at a later stage should learn and master.
That's excellent. Thank you, Professor Andreas, for starting us off there. Excellent remarks there, and maybe we'll touch on those points later on as we progress through the discussion. I want to ask Dominic now to add any additional points to that. Dominic.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, of course, I agree with many of the points that Andreas has made. So I'd just like to add a few points on top of that. So for about 10 years of my career, I was running an international survey of students right across Europe. It covered 30 different countries, and it was really always looking at who are the students who are getting to university, where have they come from, how are they spending their time at the university, etc. And basically what we found is, and these 30 countries, they were all countries on the European continent. They were part of the Bologna process. And what we found is higher education remains socially exclusive. In other words, the way we've been organizing higher education until now, or tertiary education to be broader, is we've been very much orientating to a certain type of student. And we notice many other potential students are not being kind of included within this. Now, for a certain time, maybe this would still be, there's still some plausibility behind that. But now, when we look at the society, the kind of the world we're moving into, the demands on the job in the job market, it doesn't make any sense to be kind of so exclusive about this. So this, I think, is probably one of the strongest arguments for thinking much more urgently now about being more, being more flexible about what we offer. And it's interesting because one of the effects of us being kind of exclusive in the way we've seen higher education is it's also led to the case that graduates have then been criticized when they get into the job market as not having the right skills. So there's always been this argument there's a skills mismatch. And this is very much to do with the fact that we've seen formal education and tertiary education as a long period of study, which you do kind of exclusively, and then you're finished, and then you go to the job market. This is, of course, a huge bet on the fact that you think you know what the job market needs. So in a way, actually, us organizing tertiary education like this has put the tertiary education sector under a lot of pressure, because then the job market is saying, hey, there's a lot of things happening here, and it's not being recognized. So I think this is one point. And they kind of moving on to that, and I've already implied it, we also have to think about the fact that it can't be just one long period of learning and then you're kind of finished. And, we have been talking about lifelong learning at least since the 70s as a concept, but I think none of us have we really haven't been living it. And, one of my focal points at the moment in my current work is we're building up a digital learning platform in Africa. Africa is being hugely changed through digital transformation at the moment, and through many, societal changes as well. So it also just wouldn't work to say, let's have one period of learning and then we're done. We need lots of periods of learning. And once we start thinking about lots of periods of learning, we have to think, well, how could that be organized? But we also have to think of the fact that that means different people are coming into tertiary education, bringing with them already different skills and competencies. So I think we'll come on to this later in the debate as well. But one of the biggest challenges for us then in tertiary education, if we want to offer personalized learning, is to recognize where people are at when they join the learning period. You know, so instead, before we kind of treat them a bit as tabula rasa, we just say, okay, they finished school, let's start something totally new. And you can't really take that approach anymore. So I think those are the two factors for me: being more inclusive and thinking of learning as many periods of learning instead of huge blocks and then kind of finished.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Dominic, for that addition to the points made by Professor Andreas. I'm going to come to you, Dan, now to add your points to those that have been made already.
Fantastic, thanks. And again, I'll try to layer my comments on top of what the other panelists have already shared. One thing that sticks out to me is demand, right? That institutions need to respond to demand, and that demand is coming from multiple directions. First, from the students, your customers. There's a really interesting survey that Strata Education Network did back in December, so post-pandemic, where they surveyed prospective learners, and 63%, nearly 2 in 3 prospective learners, had a strong preference for either a skills focus or a non-traditional degree. So, you know, again, they're looking at upskilling, reskilling, and really having very targeted and focused education. So that demand is certainly coming from the student, from the learner perspective, and also, as Dominic flagged, from the employer side. So every year, Manpower Group conducts a survey, and the latest results are 54% of companies globally are struggling to find people with the appropriate skills. So again, there's a mismatch in terms of what learners are emerging from educational institutions and what the expectations are in the workplace. So two really strong demands that have to be ultimately have to be recognized and addressed. And there are also other pressures emerging from non-traditional providers, so who are offering very targeted programs, boot camps, et cetera. So again, I think they're coming into the mix and offering those skills and non-degree credentials. And then we also see global companies like Apple and Google saying, well, a traditional 4-year college or university degree is no longer required. And in fact, you know, they're promoting their own programs like Google Career Certificates and others to say we have our own programs that can train you in the skills that we think are the most important. And really, it's a perfect storm. As you look at different countries around the globe, in my native United States, the student debt has now surpassed $1.5 trillion, and compound that with 40% of undergraduates who never complete their degree. So what are they leaving with? So it really is a huge number of factors that ultimately need to be addressed to help meet the needs of the economy of today, let alone the economy of tomorrow. So there's really that, you know, what we're seeing is a very strong emphasis on workplace skills, but also a number of challenges that can hold institutions back. You know, they might be regulatory or governmental constraints, you know, the ability to the speed to market. I know a prestigious university that has a great postgraduate program, a master's program on entrepreneurship. However, after 5 years of running that program, they're putting that on hold for a whole year while they redevelop. And certainly a number of factors that would go into force such a decision. But again, is that really responding at the speed of the workplace, speed of the economy, versus being able to make dynamic changes on the fly and really being able to truly personalize and be responsive to the learner. I'll just make one more comment that as we increasingly look to roll out personalized learning, one challenge that will arise with that is how do we bring meaning to those personalized credentials? Right? Credentials themselves are becoming very commoditized. So how do we bring meaning to those credentials when those credentials could represent something entirely different for every learner? And ultimately, our view is that it's personalized evidence that will bring meaning to those credentials and really help support the institutions, the learners, as well as the prospective employers who are trying to make sense of literally millions of credentials that exist today.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for that. Hani, would you like to just add your comments to that, please?
Absolutely. I think the previous panelists covered a lot of great areas, and I think we can all agree that we're witnessing a fundamental shift in the way that education is being approached. I mean, we're talking about a whole bunch of emerging technologies that are impacting the student, not only at school, at university, but also outside of it. I mean, today, you have some young students that are watching very complex YouTube videos, and by the time they go to school, some of the topics that they may get taught might seem too preliminary for them, and the opposite is correct. So we're gradually moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach, and because I mean the main reason is that it doesn't really account for the unique needs of each individual students, be it their capability or their passion. So, like the clear path is to go with something that's more adaptive, more agile, so we can really prepare our students to a job market, as my previous panelist mentioned. Like the job market that's a moving target. It's changing all the time. So it's not only the students, but also the workforce that we're talking about here, where you have some employees that are spending 10, 15 years doing a job that's becoming slowly obsolete, and there's a need to identify those individuals and make sure that we up their skills. Like in all of the industries are being disrupted all the time. So I think like the learning type that we should focus on is the one that really addresses the students' needs, addresses their strengths, their weaknesses, take into account their passion and the topics that they're interested in. And I think if we do it this way, it will really allow them to master materials that stem out of their passion and their capability, and help them craft that path that would ultimately give them their dream job.
Excellent, Hani. Thank you very much indeed for your comments. Last but not least, Dr. Jihad. You're muted.
Thank you. Probably I wouldn't be able to add much to what the esteemed panelists have added, but I will put my comments as very simply. I just read a statement from a report published in 2014 about what America needs to know about higher education redesign. It says 96% of chief academic officers believe that their students are ready for the workforce, while 11% of business leaders feel the same. It just tells you there is a fundamental gap there, okay? And I believe, okay, we are witnessing a number of forces that are beginning to destabilize the traditional model of higher education. My expectations is that the whole business model of higher education will change, and not in a long period of time. And the reasons, okay, for me is obvious, and I'll try to summarize some of those reasons that will shift the model toward a totally personalized approach. One of them is, today, the way we do things is we contract the student with a totally upfront loaded degree program with specific things to finish at the end of the 4 years. What we are not realizing today from an academic perspective is technology is changing so fast, okay, that its life cycle of the technology is actually getting much faster than the academic life cycle. So if I contracted the student today to equip him with at the end of the 4 years with a certain skills, by the time he or she graduates, those will change. Okay, so as of I'm graduating you with something that will not benefit you. Okay, traditionally we know we cannot change academics that fast, and from that perspective, Okay, it has to have a different approach. Technology will not wait for academics. It will impact the industry. The requirements for the industry will change. And in that case, okay, it will become a requirement. The second thing, jobs are becoming so granular in the level of competencies required. We cannot, as academics, okay, offer degrees at the granular level, because in that case you will have a gazillion number of degrees that you have to cater for, which you cannot. Broader things will not work. Okay, so from that perspective, going forward, with the inability of academic institution to go that level of granularity in the level of offerings, they have to cater with a different business model. The third area also, as and that will push industries to actually require the skill at the fundamental or the granular level. You know it or you don't. And that is actually what's pushing bigger institutions or bigger, let's say, industries to say, look, I don't care about your academic degree. I want to know whether you know it or not. Okay? Do you know how to do it, or I'll put you to a test? If you are able to prove that you know it, you are hired regardless of your education. Okay? So the third area or the other area is, okay, people globally of cost issues, of family issues, they are allowed to come in and come out as they please to equip, skill, reskill, upskill their abilities to do things in a different format. So in other words, what I'm trying to see here is this open loop approach, loop in, loop out. Okay, come in to equip yourself with a certain info, go back. So I'm probably concur with Dan here. It's about credentialing. I'm credentialing you with a certain set of skills now. Okay, you could go out, you could loop out, and then you could come back again, loop in again after a certain period of time to actually equip yourself with more. So in other words, recognition of a previous learning is crucial now. Okay, if you're interested in a degree, great. I mean, we could all the time stack. However, what I'm seeing, and this is inevitable with the new business model that I'm seeing, the concept of a semester, the concept of a credit hour, the concept of an academic year will disappear, whether we liked it or not. And the pressure that probably academic institutions will face now is how to work with regulatory bodies to make sure that this is accredited and this is being channeled into an industry and a technology in demand. And I believe here it's more now of a push for academic institutions to push in that direction, because it will not wait. Some earlier in time, when the change was a little bit slower, we could take our time to change things and move into the specifics of nice to have. In the situation we are in today, nice to have is no longer applicable. It's a must. And it will either you are be leading and doing that, we're going to be trailing, okay, and following. And by the way, in following adoption to technology, etc., it's a complex things to do. And you will have to go through the learning curve, and you might not be able to catch up. So my advice here is, guys, it's shorter than we expect, and we have to move as fast as possible because technology will not change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jihad, for your comments. Now, it's very interesting. I mean, I'll try to summarize all of these points at the end of the discussion. But as we sort of move towards our second question, what seems to have come out quite strongly, and I think it was actually reflected in the president's remarks as well, that actually all of this is based on, you know, the whole personalized education is student-centered, and students having, or learners having more freedom of control of their learning process. And Professor Andreas, actually in his remarks, made a point about not giving students complete control. Now, my next question, and we have a shorter amount of time, so please, you know, no more than 2 minutes to answer this. My next question is around how do we give students more control with the limitations that Professor Andreas has indicated there over their learning? You know, some will take easily to this and others will struggle. So how do you suggest we tackle this issue? I'm going to start with Dan on this one. Dan, 2 minutes, please.
Right. Look, this is another interesting topic, and I think one critical aspect of this is understanding the context for each and every learner. So, are they a mature student? Are they coming straight out of high school? Are they the first learner, first university student in their family? What is their socioeconomic background? There are a whole host of factors, in addition to just the individual students' motivations. And I think back to my personal context, being educated in America. Many students would go into the College of the Arts, where for 1 or potentially 2 years they could take a wide range of courses before they had to select a major, and really they had the opportunity to identify what their particular passion is and where their skills lie. Whereas now in Australia, where I live and where I'm raising my children, it's very much we're expecting our 17 or 18-year-olds to know exactly what they want to be when they grow up. And not all of us have grown up at this point, myself included. So, I think that's a huge burden that we're placing on our children and on these learners. So I think finding that balance is really important. And really interesting comments, Dr. Jihad, in terms of seeing that more traditional model and semesters and things like that just disappearing. But there's been some really interesting research into student perseverance, student success by Vincent Tinto, and he's identified a number of different factors that contribute, not so much from the student perspective, but factors that the institution actually should be considering. And so I want to focus more on that in terms of ensuring that institutions are setting the right framework and models. So there are a number of points, but I'll just highlight a couple of them given the time constraints. Institutional commitment to the model, and again, what we're seeing from HCT and just your aspirations and your vision is exactly what that particular aspect or requirement involves, setting high expectations. So outlining pathways for students so that they don't have total control, but giving them more flexibility and control. And two other key ones I want to highlight: support. So ensuring that the learners are feeling supported and that they're not in the wilderness on their own, and feedback on their performance, feedback on the assessment are critical. So I think, ultimately pathways and giving students the flexibility within certain constraints.
Thank you, Dan. I think that's a very important point, because obviously we're not talking about total control here, because we're talking about the faculty playing a slightly different role as mentors and coaches, but you just need to sort of still understand. We need to understand how students will react to that. Hani, I want to come to you next on this particular point. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to this point about giving students more control of their learning process?
Absolutely, totally agree with Dan with many things that he said. And the thing is, this change can only happen if the whole institute is ready. So, like you said, some students will adapt to it very quickly, others will have difficulties. And I think it's very important to identify those students early on in the process. And I think a combination of technology and the teacher in their new role can help identify the students, highlight the areas that they're struggling with, and start addressing those issues. So basically, embedding AI into our process, into the education, can also help us monitor things that cannot really. It's impossible for 1 or 2 teachers to be able to notice in students' behavior. So getting that insight and raising a red flag, through the analysis of that behavior, can only benefit the student, but also the teacher and the parents as well. Giving them an insight on what their children, what the students are going through, help them hone in on those areas of struggle, and help them make the right choices. And also, touching on what Dan said, I honestly think that we need to give them the freedom and the space to allow them to fail, but fail fast and learn from it. It's part of that journey, but also identifying that point when it happens, because the reality is, some students know exactly their areas of passion and strength, and you'll find them immersed and engaged in that topic. And others, it takes them a bit of time, and I've seen it over and over again, where a student that struggled early on, once they're given the space, they actually excelled at that topic. We just need to give them the tools and help guide them to move there faster.
Thank you very much, Hani. Dominic, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, of course. So just to maybe build again on what the colleagues have said, I think the first point, and actually Hani said it before, it was about, helping young people or helping learners, let's say, craft their own pathway. I think that's really a key point here. And I think this is really important because very often in the way we look at the way we organize our universities, and this is even those who take things like, the work from Tinto, etc., very seriously, is we see guidance and support as something we offer only to the at-risk students. It's seen as a kind of a deficit. So you're struggling, oh, now you need support and guidance. Actually, what we need to do is, even now already, when we've been moving to shorter programs. So in Europe, we've moved to, instead of longer 5-year programs, many programs are now 3 years plus 2 or 3 years plus 1. There's much more variety around. So basically, this is the point that if we just leave the learner on their own to try and struggle with finding out what fits for them, then of course, we're going to have the same kind of selectivity I was talking about before, because as Dan was saying, yeah, those people who can talk to their parents or can talk to friends about their experience have an advantage. So we need to think of how can we provide this kind of support and guidance to everyone and assume it's part of the whole learning experience. And one of the reasons we haven't managed to do that, I think, in the last 20 years, because it's been a big topic, is of course it's very resource intensive. So of course, if some of the learning experiences are moving into a digital setting, then we do have the opportunity to start trying to use that using learning analytics to provide some of that guidance. And the other point I would just like to mention, which is also kind of part of this question as well, is of course it must be possible to think of very different learning pathways. So we did a study a number of years ago for the German government on what we thought the future landscape of higher education might look like in 2030. And we actually just highlighted kind of 4 different pathways. One of them, and I think it's true, the standard kind of way universities are organized now, that will still persist. We just a little bit ironically called it Tamagotchi, because we said it's a little bit about you're not really controlled, you're not controlling your ecosystem so much. So actually the institution is doing a lot, making a lot of kind of choices for you, but it's a supportive structure. And then of course, when you go on, you've got, I think one thing which we're all moving towards now is the first part of your studies, the bit where you have all this guidance support, could be shorter. And then after that, it could be that you're already leaving tertiary education, and maybe you're continuing your learning pathways with other providers, because we're already seeing that. But then, of course, we come back to the question, how are we going to capture that in credentials? So I think that's one of the points. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dominic. And Professor Andreas, I'd like to come to you next, because obviously we're focusing more on tertiary education here, where students are meant to be, young adults and meant to be able to, control their learning to some extent. So, same question, but I just want to sort of add that little twist into the matter. So, Professor Andreas, what's your view on this issue about giving students freedom of control to manage their learning process? Have we lost Professor Andreas? Well, whilst Professor Andreas is having technical issues, let me come to Dr. Jihad. Dr. Jihad, please.
the answer to your question, Wally, okay, what I'm seeing today actually, where we push things forward is students are going to be moving toward what's called a mission rather than a major. Okay, so in other words, okay, when we say, for example, that a student, okay, is controlled by a set of requirements for a given major, no, the student will have to now follow a certain mission that he want to achieve at the end of the road. That is what we mean by giving the student a control of their own learning. So in other words, on the general mission that they want to have, okay, but not that when they are in a specific mission, they'll have to abide by a certain way of doing things, okay, such that they'll end up achieving those skills and set of requirements. And however, okay, we pushing it in a way for them to do it the way they like to do it, rather than the way we want to teach them, or we want them to know how to do it. The beauty about this whole approach is you have today a whole set of technology tools available to do that, whether it's from a technology perspective or AI implementation to track students and know whether they're doing, etc., and link all that with their even personal life, for example, to make sure, while abiding by, of course, by privacy rules, okay, but AI will be able to push the student or to guide the student toward the light of how to achieve best of what you do. So what I'm trying to say here is, okay, it's a mission rather than a major, a mission that is controlled by a specific set of specific outcomes, rather than a major that I have to abide by all set of requirements that might not necessarily be, to be honest with you, of value add to what I'm supposed to do, okay? Adaptive learning tools, for example, to push me in that direction. I learn the way I want to learn, whenever I want to learn, however I want to learn it, rather than the way you want to teach me. And I take control of what I want to be, okay? Rather than, okay, I'm forced to do things the way somebody imagined it for me, rather than, okay, the way I can excel of what I want to do.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Unfortunately, Professor Andreas is still having technical issues, so we're going to have to move on to the next question. And perhaps when he joins us, he can address this particular question. The next question revolves around technology. We've already started to talk about technology in a fairly significant way. I mean, Professor Andreas talked about machine learning, making it possible for personalized education now. You know, Hani in his remarks talked about technology being, you know, a useful basis for this adaptive learning that we're talking about. So the next question is really around the use of, you know, big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Do you believe these technologies are mature enough really to support students in the way that we are describing? And you know, what are the challenges that you think we need to overcome with regards to these technologies? And you know, how do we go about finding solutions? That's not three questions. That's just all you know, around the same issue around, is the technology mature enough? And you know, if not, what challenges do you think you know, we still need to overcome? So let me start with Dominic on this one. Dominic?
Yeah, sure. So the first question is, you know, is it mature enough? So I think we have to think of technology in two ways. It's like, okay, what could it actually be doing? And then what we're talking about here with data, big data and artificial intelligence is we're talking about, have we got the right kind of data that we need also to be doing what we would hope? So of course, I have great hope, let's say, in learning analytics and, you know, the kind of recommender systems that which one sees also with Amazon, things like this. I mean, this can help a lot. I already alluded to it. I think it can help a bit on the one hand in making some choices, because if you've got many choices, it's good if it's kind of limited in some way. Another thing which I find very interesting, which we started experimenting on in a platform I used to work for, was if you have the case that you have many people, many learners actually kind of following their own pathways, it's, if you've got enough people on the platform and you have good data, you can start to nudge people into groups which is quite nice, because one thing we know about self-paced learning is it actually works better still if people are studying in groups, because learning is essentially a social activity. You want to be able to exchange with other people about what you're doing. So yes, I do think the technology is there. We know that we have to be very careful with all of this data. We know that it can produce a lot of biases at the moment. So it's very important when we do any of this that we have it accompanied with research at the same time, so that we really look into what kind of insights are we getting, and we don't just kind of act on them, but we also reflect on those as well. The limitation, as I say, is the data flows, because the university, generally speaking, is not a place where all the data flows together, because it's often a very decentralized type of organization. And we also have lots of kind of bumps in the whole kind of learning pathway somebody might take. So these are the challenges. And then the last thing I would like to mention, of course, and I think this is something that we are beginning to take more seriously, but probably is the biggest challenge, is we have to make sure that in all of this, we pay attention to data protection and the self-sovereignty of the learners and their data. So because, of course, this provides amazing insights into many things that these people are doing, these learners are doing, and we have to always be a little bit aware of what we're doing there as well.
Thank you very much for that, Dominic. Hani, you work in this field. You're an expert in this area. So let me turn over to you next.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I think you know, the fact that the big data and AI technologies are maturing rapidly. They're certainly ready from a technology perspective, but I think what's going to need to happen is there's a new job types on the receiving end that can properly analyze and harness that data. So you need a combination of a data scientist that's writing the code and capturing a lot of behaviors, but at the same time, you also need the analysts to make sense of it and present it to the teachers and to the students in a way that they can understand it. So that data is very powerful, and if it's used correctly, it can really support the students, it can support the educational system, and really help them explore areas that they probably don't know about themselves, because it's extremely powerful indeed. You know, you can use it to learn more about yourself as a student, about your performance. It can help guide you on what is likely the next possible topic that you want to learn, making suggestions about the next topic based on your previous performance. And again, like approaching this, you know, can really provide, can help the students make the better choice for themselves and engage them in the whole process. The challenges, I think, will come out of like just the sheer size of that data, you know, because there's a lot of data that can be captured. So if an institute is not ready to harness that data and make sense of it, I think there can be the sense of frustration. So again, having the right panel, the dashboards, and the analysts that can make sure that the data is being analyzed and processed properly will really help. And you know, for this to happen, the whole institute needs to be in place. And I really think that teachers, veteran teachers, have a role to play here, because the transition is not going to be that smooth. Like, you cannot just flick a switch and rely on AI to be driving the whole process. So it's finding that happy marriage between the expertise and of those skilled, experienced teachers, and the technology that they're presented with that should be used as a role to help with that transition. So, you know, to just mitigate the risk of making this like a failed experiment for any institute, what we typically do in software development, and I think it actually applies to the educational system, is to do what we call a soft launch. So, you know, you select a group of students, you select a group of teachers, and do that little experiment and learn from it, learnings that's specific to your institute before you scale it to the whole institute.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Hani. Professor Andreas is back with us. Unfortunately, we missed you for the last question, so I don't know whether you might be able to combine your responses to the previous question and this one. The previous question was really around, and you actually raised this point about not giving students, full control. But what we're now talking about is the use of technology to support the students. I don't know whether it's possible to, combine your response to both questions within 2 minutes.
I'm gonna try. My computer just broke completely down. So much for technology.
Oh my, yeah.
Anyways, that's how it is. To the previous question, yeah, very shortly, I think obviously some of the students will struggle with this new approach, but in the end, to the previous approach, to the more structured approach and more predetermined content of courses, there's also students who struggle. So it's up to the professors, to the academics, to motivate them, to help them, to guide them. And I think with the new technologies now, it's even easier because professors, they can detect almost instantaneously when students have problems in looking at the online material, if they provide students with multiple choice questions after each learning unit, for example, they can see if they can respond to those or not, and intervene immediately in order to improve their online or also offline courses. Now with your current question, again, sorry for that. Is AI and are these new approaches, new technologies enable the new learning approach and for any course, for any disciplines? I'm not so sure. Probably not for everything, but for many of the areas. And I can give you the example of language training, which we used at ESCP for a couple of years now on an online platform with AI and all these new technologies. And while these online language learning platforms, they work very well in lower levels of language trainings in more advanced settings, or for students who are more advanced in languages, more difficult. Also, what we saw, well, most of our students are European, and so the language training worked very well for European languages. When it went outside of Europe, was more difficult in these language trainings. And finally, what we also saw, and this is a point definitely to be discussed and to be thought of, some of the students, they played the system, and they responded to questions in a way that they got easier questions afterwards in order to get better grades, or they did responding to the questions to these online language trainings in a more of a group work, which was not intended either. And obviously the results were not at the point for those students. But again, and this is maybe the loop to your previous question, there are some students which always struggle with a more autonomous approach and more freedom to learning. And it's up to the academics, to the professors to guide them and to give them the right frameworks.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor Andreas. Dr. Jihad. You're muted.
If you really want to ask about the maturity of the technology, okay, I mean, coming from a totally technology background, it's definitely mature more than the sector needs. And the second thing is, okay, it is actually changing so fast that actually does not give you time to judge whether the previous version was mature or not. Okay, so to be honest with you, in this regard, I have a hope and I have a fear. Okay, so a hope that technology will drive things, whether we like it or not. Okay, where it works or where it doesn't, because you will have to adapt for it no matter what, because this is inevitable, and this is the whole way things are being driven. What I'm afraid of actually, okay, is okay. Human beings are not really adaptive to such fast change. You will not train them today in a given technology and you require them to use another one in another year. Change management will be a crucial thing for academic institutions. so the approach to it will have to be totally different. So from that perspective, and the investment in change management and pre-requirements for people onboarding people with technology is crucial now, and institutions have to think about it very differently than the way they are handling it today. So I believe, okay, that equipping the technologies to be the driver is crucial, and it will be the driver of how things will be readily available. The most important part also is when a new technology coming in, it's not more like a switch on and off to be able to do things. And I'll give you an specific example. I mean, we're talking about AI and how it's supposed to, let's say, follow every single student because a single teacher or two are not going to be able to follow a track. Okay. Nonetheless, okay, how long would it take an institution to really put just the infrastructure required for big data or, okay, a AI-ready environment? Okay. In HCT, it took us about a couple of years to have that ready. Okay. To be able now to be ready to, let's say, put an AI layer on top of that and be able to feed the data. Quality of data, that is also another big area. Okay. Investment, that's a third big area also. So all these are competing factors that most likely will work on impeding the adoption of, okay, institutions to do that. Nonetheless, technology will not wait. Okay, it will keep going. And the time you implement things will be changed another year. So how dynamic academic institutions, how agile are they? This is a must in order to able to adapt to things, which is a totally different culture than the way academic institutions currently are. And I'll give you a very specific example. I mean, today when we talk about what Dan mentioned earlier, for example, about credentialing and micro-credentialing, because while people believe in it, okay, and this is a requirement because of the changes, Western academic institutions were not able to do it because of the regulations, because of the way the traditional things. So they went outside the box and built a business unit outside to be a revenue maker for the mother institutions, while the mother institution stayed doing the same thing, okay? And because of those inability to change things, but this will not stay for longer, and institutions will have to be much more dynamic, much more agile and adaptive technology, and it's definitely more than mature, more than enough for what the academic institutions are requesting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jihad. Last but not least, Dan, do you have some comments to make on this point?
A few, but yeah, I'd say my colleagues on the panel have done a fantastic job covering this topic. So maybe just a few quick points. Because these technologies are increasingly becoming accessible, easily accessible. Go to AWS, go to Google, go to Microsoft. They all have their own variants of machine learning, NLP, AI. So it is very accessible. I think one of the points that Dominic made earlier in terms of that bias and that data, where is your data is a critical aspect, and ultimately institutions should be asking why. Right? So AI is advancing, as you said, Dr. Jihad, faster than anything else, and yet everyone is throwing AI at a solution. And is it the proper solution? So it's context. It's what are the benefits and what's the alternative? So if we're using AI to search through millions of records, searching for evidence of skills, yeah, that's a much better purpose, having AI do that than having humans do that. And I think another area where we're seeing that evolution is where, and again, echoing comments from others on the panel, where we're looking to do predictive analytics versus prescriptive. So suggestions, recommendations, for human to then synthesize and take action on, rather than AI, big brother, making those decisions for humans, and on behalf of humans. I think that's that is certainly evolving, but I think it's tread with care, because these are our learners, the future generations that we're talking about here.
Sure, thank you very much indeed, Dan. Now we're running tight on time, so I want to, before we go to the next question, I want to launch the second of the two polls for today. So again, we'd like audience participation here. Just launching the poll, so you should see it on your screen now. What's the most important factor that is needed for personalized education to be a success? Is it students knowing how to learn? Is it faculty functioning as mentors and coaches? Is it technology maturity and ease of use? Is it flexible curriculum and assessments? Or is it the variety of content and media to enable effective students learning? So again, just give you a couple of minutes, the audience, to respond to that poll. Okay, well, the answers aren't moving so much, and over 63% have voted. So I'm going to end the polling here and share the results. And it looks like most of you have gone. 28% of you have gone for the second option. That the most important factor for you is faculty functioning as mentors and coaches rather than teachers, which is actually a very good juncture to ask the next question that we're now going to discuss. So let me just stop sharing these results, the next question actually, builds on one of the points that Dr. Jihad made about the adoption of technology as being one of his fears, that it's the human factor being slow to adopt rapidly changing technology. Now, with the audience saying that actually they believe that faculty functioning as mentors and coaches is the most important, then obviously there's an important part of that in terms of the support that we've talked about and so on and so forth, but also faculty adopting technology is another factor that we need to consider in that mix, in the use of technology to be able to provide that support. So the next question I want to ask you as panelists is to redefine the role of faculty to become more as mentors and coaches, to provide the kind of support that we've already discussed. Clearly will be important if personalized education is going to work, but how significant do you think this change will be for faculty and for the institutions like HCT to be able to make that change to support personalized education going forward? Dr. Jihad, I want to start with you this time, please.
Thank you, Wally. Now, with faculty case supposed to change to the role of a coach and a mentor, I want to come back probably for an initial statement that was mentioned by Andreas, okay, is it's about guidance. Okay, it's about, okay, a mechanism of how you want to achieve something, okay, based on he or her understanding of what the mission, as I mentioned earlier, that the student has to achieve. When in an environment when we're going to be seeing there is, okay, let me put it this in another way, to be honest with you, okay. And there is a theory in the literature, in education literature, talks about differentiated learning. In other words, when you are able to offer some time for each student, everybody knows that does not work in the current environment. If you have 20 students in a classroom, you cannot give each one 2 minutes. Okay, so from that perspective, okay, when you want to be able to coach them, you actually are implementing now what we call differentiated learning. You dedicate a time to guide and build or pave the pathway for how best a student supposed to achieve, or a learner supposed to achieve, the mission that he designed for himself to use. One key factor of those is how the faculty is equipped with the technology tools, because the student, when he's guided, he has to go back and utilize the technologies. The second thing is, okay, we are not talking about students and faculty or coaches being in the same place. They could be thousands of miles away. So from that perspective, utilizing of technology to provide the guidance to the student is also of a crucial importance. What also would increase its importance is when we mentioned earlier that the business model will change and the concept of a credit hour will change. So you are not going to be guiding or working with students or a given cohort in the same period of time under a certain topic. Okay, you will be having a set of students. Each one is different, as probably is seeking or working on a different mission, and you'll be able to guide and tell each and every one at their own pace how to do that. So the norm of instruction, the norm of delivering knowledge is going to be no longer of a crucial importance to the students, because if I can't find it in Google, I don't need that. I can find it on my own. Technology will be able to provide me with that. And today, a large number of publishers, even though their main job is content, it is now their main job is how to empower the content with technology tools. So I'm expecting absolutely that the role of the faculty will have to completely change. But I'm back to what I mentioned earlier about my fear, is how long would it take academic institutions to be able to change that model and be able to re-equip their faculty with that role instead of an instruction methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jihad. Professor Andreas, what are your views on this? Adapting professors, faculty to this new model of learning that we've been talking about?
I totally agree. I think it is going to be a big challenge. Now, I think if there's one positive about COVID-19, it has already forced all the professors worldwide to change a little bit of their mindset too, because it was not so much about the technology not available or the professors not completely knowing how to do it, but it was a little bit about the mindset. And now everybody has to be forced to go into the online learning. So I think this, in a certain way, helped a lot. Now, I mean, professors, there will be some of them who will struggle like students struggle. Others will be happy because, I mean, to reteach the same concepts, the same theories over and over again is not necessarily the most interesting part of the job. So to have a more flipped classroom perspective, and now with technology it actually might work, is definitely a more positive perspective. In the end, I think for those who struggle, you need to give them trainings. You need to provide them with trainings, and also, or more importantly, I think you need to provide them with the time to follow those trainings and to attend those trainings, because a professor usually has a very busy timetable, and if you don't give him the time, or as an institution make the effort to say, okay, this is really important, we provide you with the time to really get into this new way of teaching and new approach, then it's going to be difficult. And maybe a final remark, in the end, it is the same as with society. You also need to reassure professors that due to the technology, AI, etc., they're not going to lose their jobs, and they're not going to be made redundant by the institution, but the opposite is the case. We even need them more to guide the students, to be the coach and the moderator and the trainer as their future job description.
Thank you, Professor Andreas. Dan, and again, I think I'd like to hear your comments on this, please.
Fantastic. Well, it wouldn't be a good panel without some disagreement. So I'm going to vehemently agree and also disagree with some of the earlier comments. Dr. Shahad, I think you nailed it. Change management, right? Something like this is huge. It's massive if you're asking faculty to shift and take on coaching responsibilities, which ultimately require different skill sets than teaching or research, which many academic staff are also tasked with. So I certainly, generally agree that faculty are part of the solution, but I think I'd say they're not the only players, and I think there may be another area to start, and I think that's the student advisor, because you really want, when someone's running a race, you don't want to say you're going to have 12 coaches that are going to coach you through this race. And each of those coaches maybe they're going to steer you in a different direction, tell you how to change your gait and look this way, or breathe or don't breathe. And so I think it's, especially with these student choice and flexibility and freedom, having someone who can guide them through that entire race, through that entire on their mission, as you said, Dr. Jihad, is so critical. And a partner company to ours actually engaged with an institution in the US called Brazos Sport College. And Brazos Sport College was faced with challenges around declining retention rates. And so what they did is they took a two-pronged approach, where they took some of their student advisors as well as some of their faculty, and they turned them into coaches, and they used that word, very, very purposefully. And so those advisors work with the students, help them, and again, targeting a lot of the same factors that I flagged earlier in terms of the research to set up a solid environment for learners to prosper. But so that was one aspect, is having those student advisors / coaches who are with the student from the day they enroll to the day that they graduate. The second aspect is technology. So using technology, in this case, a mobile communications platform, to enable and to really connect with learners where they are on their mobile, right? Real time. So being able to use that technology, and when they conducted the initial rounds of testing with a control group, they found that those who were participating in the program, who were randomly selected, were 24% more likely to continue in their studies. So there's clearly strong merit in the concept of coaches and mentors. I think we just have to very carefully think about who we choose to put in those roles.
Thank you, Dan. Hani?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I want to start by saying that technology will play a key role in personalization of learning, but it's really the way that the teachers are gonna cultivate and utilize this technology in the classroom that will eventually lead to its success. So, as Dr. Jihad said, this is gonna take a long time for institutes to adapt it. So maybe the only saving grace of this is that will give the teachers time to start preparing themselves for that change. But another point that I want to touch on is it's not only the technology, but we're actually facing a new generation of students. I mean, you see kids today, 3-4 years old, holding the iPads and the iPhones, and there's that gap that happens, you know, by the time they get to school or to university, where I think a very important topic here is how the teacher can make themselves relatable to that new generation of student, and understanding that the way that they interact with the technology to really, you know, define that common ground that can strengthen the bond and give the student trust, you know, through that relatability. So you know, I don't think technology will ever replace teaching. It's just it's gonna be the sidekick for the teacher, and it'll give them the ability to simplify. It'll give them the ability to simplify the understanding of the subject for the student. And I think if it's used correctly, the teacher can be more influential to the student, and that relatability that I mentioned before, I think will help, you know, help aid them in strengthening the connection with the student and contribute to a better level of personalized learning experience.
Thank you, Hani. Last but not least, Dominic.
Yeah, I'm going to actually take the point that although I think in American one normally means, when one says faculty, one normally means kind of the academic staff. In the UK, we would normally faculty as actually the organizational unit. And I think maybe that's a key point here. When we're thinking of this, I think the way the organizational unit and the skills the organizational unit needs will be different. If we just think very simply on the case of how are most universities organized at the moment in terms of skills and competencies for digital learning, normally this is a totally separate unit. And so we really have a kind of a big separation between, you know, how presence lessons, how normal kind of physical lessons are organized. And then if teachers or academics want some advice on how to do digital learning, then they'll go to the center for some advice. The interesting thing is, if we really think of how can we really make use of all of these elements we've got, and particularly if we think, okay, we're going to have more data perhaps, which is telling us more about the activities of the learners, then we need to also make sure we've got kind of this data analysis competency really quite close to the learner. And that, I think, will be part of the mentoring and part of the supervision, is you actually need to actually do this. So it reminds me a little bit of a discussion I had about 5 years ago with a head of a bank in Norway, where they say, well, actually in the banking sector, everyone is turning into data analysts now. And I think this might be one of the major elements. If we're saying, okay, there's more data around that we can be using, there's more learning and analytics, we have to know what we can do with this. Now, I think in the past, when we talked about the idea of academics becoming kind of mentors and coaches, we were thinking of this idea of the cognitive apprenticeship, this kind of idea of saying, okay, I'm going to tell you what it's like to be a scientist in this particular situation or be an academic. This is how I work through these kind of things. So this bit, of course, it's got a great connection also to the research work that the academics are doing. It's what we're calling in Germany research-driven teaching. So this will become this will be, of course, a key element. But I think we're going to have to get, you know, the instructional designers much closer to the learning experience, the guidance, as we said before. It would be great if it doesn't, if the guidance isn't an auxiliary service, but is also really kind of pulled in together. And maybe we have to think of these kind of organizational units and how we can organize that. So all of those things come together, because I think supervision and coaching and support won't be done by an individual person. It will be done by a group of people with different skills and competencies offering support for the learners.
Thank you very much indeed, Dom. And I think this point is actually a good juncture to ask well, I'm now, this question I'm going to ask is going to be the last question, because I think in view of time, we're going to forego the last question I actually planned to ask, which I think you've actually addressed to some extent in terms of the transitions that are required. So I want to focus my last question on the flexibility of curricula and assessments that will be needed. So obviously, having been talking about faculty and academic staff and the changes that they need to go through to enable personalized education, I want to talk more now about the curricula and assessments and flexibility and the changes that might be required there. So let me start with Professor Andreas on this one. Do you have a view that you'd like to share on this point around assessments and curricula?
Definitely, I think curricula will be almost a nightmare to construct and to design. Obviously, for logistical reasons, but even more if you think about how difficult it is already to design a curriculum. I mean, it has to go through a variety of committees in an academic institution. Everybody has to agree on the different parts of it, and now the curricula will be a lot more complex, so the finding of an agreement might also be a little bit more complicated, but to be seen. With assessment, yes, I think the assessments, that's even the more difficult issue, because assessments need to change completely. We also now during COVID-19 that online exams are not the same as offline exams, that online exams, if you do it the same ones as you would do offline, there is potential for cheating. You cannot so much control who is sitting behind the screen, what they do below the table, under their desk. And obviously, I mean, you could say AI is also able already, and in the future definitely, to detect emotions and facial expressions and so on. But then we're going to get into another discussion, which is more about data privacy and all these kind of more ideological and philosophical questions even. I'm not going to go into that, but I think either if we want to stick to traditional exams, I'm afraid it will have to be offline, or it needs to be a complete different kind of assessments with more homework-based essays, etc., which will be a huge change for many of the faculty members.
Thank you, Professor Andreas. Dominic, I'm going to come to you next on this one. I think this is an area that perhaps you might have done some research on. It is one of my key things at the moment, especially with the learning platform we're building now, which is, I really think the starting point should be what should be actually kind of on this communication document, which is the communication piece between where you want to actually apply or use your learning and what you've done to kind of achieve that learning, what is the evidence. So I'm a great fan of, for example, open badges, which is something we're working on at the moment. But maybe just to take one step back, I wanted to just mention an anecdote which I heard a number of years ago from a London university. And it's to do with actually what Andreas was just mentioning, which is you really have to think about, if you're going to flexibilize learning, you have to think about assessment as well. And it's often, those two things are often seen at the moment separately, which I find a little bit odd. So what they'd done in this London university is they decided, wouldn't it be great if their students didn't always have to go to the lectures, but they would offer the lectures kind of on demand. So you could watch them then, you could stream them anytime, which fitted into your own timetable, which is a great way of flexibilizing. They didn't change, though, the fact that the end exam is always right at the end of the year, and is really just a question of what you should have learned from those lectures. So what they found is when they first introduced it, they suddenly found, which isn't that surprising, most of the students were watching these videos about 11 or 12 at night. In a way, one could say, okay, that's all right. We also know when there are 24-hour libraries, a lot of students go to them because somehow that fits to their nocturnal patterns, perhaps. But what they then found after a while is all the students realized best thing to do is to watch these videos just before the exams.
So they basically did nothing until the end of the year, where they thought, okay, now I'm going to cram these videos and do the exam. So the point is, it's because you didn't think of the two things together, then the flexibility you thought you were creating, you kind of then worked against by having a very fixed type of assessment. So it's really important actually to think about this. And I do agree, I mean, as Andreas said, of course, curriculum is going to be a nightmare in that way. But the other way, if we think of what is the assessment piece, what is the document we want to have at the end, it actually gives us a whole load of flexibility in how somebody actually gets to that point. And then when we've got this flexibility, then we can think about, well, does it mean then that the person has to have attended all the lectures or done certain things? Or is it the case that some of those skills and competencies we want to be testing for or having evidence for, they've actually already got from their working life? So often, and I think we always have this tendency when we're talking about students, we're always thinking of people who are 18 to 22-year-olds. That group is getting smaller and smaller in many parts of the world, not in every part, but so when we think of that, we also have to take some of this a bit more seriously as well. So yes, I think probably the biggest kind of cornerstone of flexible learning is to think about the assessment and particularly the credential piece.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dominic. Dan?
Right. Well, look, yeah, this is big, and my colleagues at universities have a clear insight there. I think from my perspective, well, first I'd echo your comments, Dr. Jihad, that Western institutions have many more constraints. So that's there's that inertia, regulation, requirements, accreditation that are barriers to these rapid changes. But what I have seen with a number of institutions is they've defined what their graduate attributes are. So what should a graduate of institution X look like? And more specifically, what are the skills and competencies that they possess? And as others have said, connecting assessment into the curricula to really look at what are the potential pathways and how will they ensure that all of those graduate attributes are actually being taught and being assessed, and ultimately echoing my earlier comments and yours around evidence. What evidence is being gathered to validate those skills? So I think that's that there's a massive effort there in terms of how institutions are starting. Certainly starting small, looking at the continuing education or short courses. Some are building pathways or looking at postgraduate. In some cases, they may say, well, if you have multiple campuses, let's start this innovation in one campus and look to build it out from there. But it's a massive undertaking, and so I think looking for partners, looking for resources that are built to support specific workplace relevant skills, and where those can be brought in and incorporated in. I think that's a wonderful shortcut that can be utilized.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Hani.
Yeah, I mean, the curricula part is definitely going to be the challenging one. And I think, maybe a possible place to start is, rather than keeping it completely open-ended, is to start by looking at creating like a handful or slightly higher than a handful possible paths. And I'll just draw on our experience in terms of how we've done that in virtual reality for the assessment part. Is we basically we went with a tiered approach for the created learning targets, and we put weights on those milestones in that journey, and we've taken it even further to to create a higher level of engagement. Is those milestones points we try to gamify it to immerse the students a bit more in it. So the score, became at the end of it, there's a leaderboard, there's a bit of competitiveness between the students, and it creates a motivation for them to finish a certain part of the curriculum. The other thing that we've utilized is creating a reward system within the assessment program. In a way, I'll give an example. For instance, if a student has a math exam, like their goal is to write complex algorithm, well, let's find out what is the real life application of that particular algorithm, and perhaps using augmented reality, they can write the code for an algorithm that would drive the movement of a robot. And all of a sudden, there's a purpose for that learning, and there's a reward at the end of it. So I think this puts a slightly different perspective on the scoring system, but we really feel that this is starting to be adopted. We're seeing really good results, and I think there's an opportunity there for future assessment.
Thank you very much, Hani. Dr. Jihad.
A problem on the discussion here is, okay, we're trying to, let's say, superimpose, okay, what is going to happen down the road based on what's happening now. So we're talking about assessment, etc., based on the current model. Okay, so we raise assessment, evaluation, etc. We just want to probably, okay, kind of move, because if we are suggesting or expecting a totally different business model, and I believe there has to be a totally different business model for the assessment as well. Okay, so the way I think about it, to be honest with you, is in terms of curricula. On the contrary, I feel it's going to be easier. Why? Because you're going to be talking about now very granular level. If I'm offering, let's say, give you an example with HCT. If you are offering today, or any academic institution, 71-degree programs, those probably going to be 7,000 modules. Okay. When you come to a modular structure, then putting a curricula around that particular set of a digital badge or open badge or a credential will be much easier than you want to account for 70 for a program that is 4 year long. So in my definition or my perspective, it's going to be easier. The second thing is, okay, when we talk about assessment, the knowledge part is gone. Okay, we're talking about skills. Skills means you have to demonstrate how to apply things. Whether you study it before the exam, whether you do it at night, whether you do it there, it's not going to matter. Okay, it's going to be back to how you want to do it. So my response to you, Ali, and to the esteemed team here, we want to think of how to assess given the new business model, rather than trying to invoke technology, etc., on what's happening today, because we know this is going to change. Curricula, we're going to be very easy, because you're going to look at modular, small module. And when we talk about skills only, not knowledge, you could find it anywhere, anytime. I don't need to assess you with, okay? You could Google it all the time. You could have a course here and there offered somewhere, open. You could find the information that you want. But skills, it's about demonstration of how do you know how to do things, okay? And that will not save you whether you've done it before the class, whether you've done it at night, whether you do it morning, whether you do it alone, whether you do it with the group. It's not going to matter. So no, on the contrary, probably I need to be different with my esteemed colleagues here. Curriculum will be easier, examination will be easier.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Jihad. Now, we're going to move to the Q&A part of the discussion now. Quite a few questions have come through. Unfortunately, due to time, we will not be able to answer all the questions that have been raised. And looking at some of the questions, actually, they might have been asked before certain questions were addressed earlier in the discussion. So I believe quite a number of the questions from the audience have already been addressed by the discussion so far. But I've picked a few that perhaps I'm going to ask any member of the panel to jump in and answer as they wish. But again, please be conscious of time. The first question is around I think one of the panelists mentioned perhaps needing some sort of framework or some sort of accreditation to guide the whole personal education aspect. Is this needed? Is there something around the way in which personal education needs to be delivered that requires this kind of international framework or accreditation? Who would like to answer that question?
Well, I might go very briefly for that. Because I think I said this thing about the framework, but well, I don't think it's necessarily, I mean, that you can't do it without it, but if you're living in a world of higher education where anything is accredited, anything is with rankings, with all these international bodies certifying, etc., etc. So I think to make this move from such a structured world into a complete non-accredited, no framework at all world, I don't think that institutions will play the game. Now, obviously, there might be new players, and they might play the game, and they might, in a certain way, and this is what has been said before, disrupt the industry, and this might very well happen, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else would like to, I'm going to take, what's one more on this?
Yeah,
Dominic,
if I may,
go ahead.
Thank you. I think part of this is just making sure that there's a recognizability of what is in the credentials. So of course, the worry of a learner is, okay, I'm getting all these different types of qualifications or certificates and nobody knows what they are. Just maybe of a point of interest, the European Commission has picked this up in the topic of micro-credentials, and I wrote the background report on that with some colleagues. And part of it was just to try to say, okay, there's certain kind of meta information, there's certain information that must be contained within these to make it easy to be recognized in different settings. So I think we have to kind of move to that area so that it's clear to recognize, is that something that has been accredited within, for, let's say, the normal higher education system, or is it aligned to a skills framework which is recognized? So we just have to make sure these documents become recognized through having them in a standard format.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Dominic. The next question is well, presumably this might have come from a medical student. The thought of a year one medical student being given control over his or her learning path and deciding not to take a clinical skills class is the question. Now, I mean, is this? I know that you know, when we talked about this, it wasn't really along those lines. But who would like to take on this question just to make it clearer? Dr. Jihad.
I believe I touched a little bit into that one, and I said when a student picks a mission, he has or she has to abide by a certain set of rules or pathways to achieve the mission. So if the part of the mission is actually to take those classes on clinical practice, she or he must take them. Being in control and being chosen, it does not mean you're going to be astray on moving around without actually a specific path. No, you choose a mission of what you want to do, and then there is a prescribed pathway in order for you to be, let's say, offered or credentialed with that outcome. So no, it's not really at that level of a choice. If you chose to be an MD, there is a certain path that you have to follow, and you have to achieve certain credentials that allows you to be so.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to tackle this one? Okay, let me move on to the next question. The next question is around edge computing, and maybe whoever takes on this can explain what edge computing is for the uninitiated like myself. So how practical is edge computing to enable data-driven decisions in personalized education? Hani, this sounds like this might be one for you. Hani?
He's mute.
You're on mute. You're muted, Hani.
Sorry, this is not really my area of expertise.
Oh, isn't it? Okay, fine. Anyway, see what you can do anyway.
Sorry, can you
so it's raising the issue around edge computing, enabling data-driven decisions, and basically the person raising the question is saying that, well, you know, it's going to be quite difficult for edge computing to be utilized for data-driven decision making in personalized education. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I mean, like not knowing enough about the exact question. I'm just gonna say that I really believe that data-driven decisions can be a much more powerful way to make the right path. Just having the insight and looking at the edge cases of where students could fail, looking at the having some predictive analysis of their behavior and catching it before it's too late, I think is going to be crucial in that path.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else would like to try to answer this one?
Sure.
Jihad, bitte.
Dr. Jihad, please. Yeah.
Sorry, Dominic. It's simply, I mean, okay, edge computing is more of trying to say we are utilizing the cloud for our operations rather than your personal computer, or in a very lame language. Okay, and in an edge computer, for example, where you would utilize the power of cloud computing to analyze data, okay, rather than your own, let's say, high performance computing sitting in your own environment. So yes, I definitely concur, that for AI driven data analytics, particularly around machine learning and predictive analytics, you need a large amount of computing power, and edge computing, or in a different language, cloud computing, that utilize a large number of CPUs might definitely have an add value. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me move on to the next question. Again, I'm just conscious of time. The next question is actually quite interesting. It's around, well, what about personalized institutions? We're talking about personalized education, but what about personalized institutions? And the person raising the question is actually sort of describing a personalized institution as one that's having multiple small distributed, elements of the institution, perhaps as part of a wider consortium. Is that a viable way of perhaps encouraging, or facilitating personalized education, having a disparate, distributed, subdivided organizations that that collaborate to support students in personalized education? I would like to, Dominic, do you want to have a stab at this one? You were trying to.
Yes. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's firstly, I think this kind of happens anyway, but probably only from the learner perspective, and especially if we look at the situation under COVID now. I think as soon as the learners, many students have realized, oh, I'm not expected to go to campus anymore, then they're saying, okay, so I'm supposed to take part in this digital course that my university is offering. Maybe there's other courses which are actually better. So I think in a way they're already kind of experiencing this diversity. If we look at it on an institutional level, in Europe, again, we've got something called the European University Alliance, which has been an idea of about 10 different universities and different constellations working together. And it has been very much about this idea that it's different types of universities coming together, but then trying to think of the whole challenge that Dr. Jihad has been mentioning the whole time of how can we create the right structures within quality assurance regimes, within funding regimes, which make this happen. So I think this is beginning to happen. I think we probably don't see it quite as clearly as maybe individual learners do, but I think it's this kind of diversity of the learning experience is happening. It's more about us recognizing it and maybe showing it also in credentials.
Thank you, Dominic. And the last question, the question is this: do you agree that socioeconomic and demographical differences need to be explicitly addressed before we engage the machine learning phases? And do you believe that deep learning is still not ready for such high stakes tasks? Who wants to end on a high note?
I'll dive in there. I think it's a consideration in one of the factors that I flagged early on in the discussion. But I think there's been research and efforts done to look at exactly that, you know, those groups of individuals coming from a lower socioeconomic group, or other potentially disadvantaging factors. And so that's can actually be used as a positive to say, great, well, we know this particular data point. So how can we then, and as one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, how can we group individuals who may run into similar challenges? And so that's actually a better approach than treating every learner exactly the same and just assuming what's right for this person will be right for the other. Right? The challenge institutions will face is what are the most relevant factors that need to be weighed incorporated, considered in these models, and which factors are not relevant. And I think that's a tough question to answer.
Thank you very much, Dan. Any other? I will take one more comment on this question. If anyone has any comments to add to that. No. Okay, fine. Let's. I'd like to end the discussion now, and hopefully the audience will agree that today's discussions have really helped us to understand better the potential for implementing personalized education successfully. On behalf of the Higher Colleges of Technology, I would like to thank Dr. Ablati for his opening remarks earlier. I would especially like to thank all of our panelists for their contributions today. The recording for this panel discussion, I believe, will be available on social media, and we can provide details as to where that can be found after the session. Final thanks to you, the audience, for your attendance. We had a very good attendance today, and I hope you felt the session was insightful. Thank you very much indeed, and look out for the next webinar that we'll be presenting in this series. And I'd like to say thank you, and hopefully see you again soon. Thank you to all the panelists, and hopefully we'll be in contact again soon. Thank you.